Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Unique Not Different. My name is Shamla, and guess what? Today is International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and this year's theme is promoting the sustainability of persons with disability in terms of leadership and how we progress in terms of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And with me, I have Mrs. Ria Mohammed Davison. And okay, so let me start at a line. She's an attorney at law. She was a part-time is a part-time lecturer. Was okay, a part-time lecturer at the Hewarding Law School. Was a full-time lecturer at the University of the West Indies. She graduated with her law degree at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill. Her master's degree, here this one, at Harvard Law School. She also has a certificate of merit in where?
From the Hewarding Law School.
Right, the Hewarding Law School. And she does a lot of pro bono work in terms of human rights as it affects persons with disability, in terms of poverty, education, employment. Yeah. And you also did we will get back to that. You have a quite, a vast thing in your field in terms of giving back, in terms of the Trinidad and Tobago Law Association. Mm-hmm. You're a member.
Yes, I am.
And also, you're in one of the committee for the, which one?
So the Law Association has recently set up a human rights committee, and basically what that committee is going to do is try to partner with civil society and advocates on behalf of the most vulnerable groups in our society, one of which includes persons with disabilities. So the rights of persons with disabilities is actually very, very high on the agenda of the committee.
Right, and as I mentioned, you do a lot of pro bono, which is voluntary work in terms of, like, let's say, Kudo and the Down Syndrome Family Network. But what started it all? Because, you do this voluntary. What stirred your passion to get towards human rights?
So I think I've always been interested in human rights law because of my own philosophy that law is supposed to exist to make a more just and equitable society. But my interest in disability law in particular stems from the fact that persons with disabilities really occupy a very vulnerable position in the society. So you see high rates of unemployment, lack of access to education, which results in poverty. Yeah. And my own life story is a testament to the power of education to overcome poverty. And I think that those are issues that really should concern all members of the public, because as we age, our bodies don't continue to function at 100%. Exactly. And therefore, it is highly likely that at some point in our lives, we will acquire a disability
in some form or the other.
Yes.
Right. So in terms of, like, for example, education, a lot of parents still get turned away from elementary education because they say, okay, the children is not potty trained. And by the time they become potty trained, they say they're too old to get into the mainstream school or get into an education system. Is there any legal ramification in terms of government? We can, like, parents can take to say, okay, my child has this right, and their disability develop, although their brain developing, maybe their body developing, less rapidly than their brain, right? And is there something that they can do and say, okay, my child was turned away, what can I do?
So I think that one of the problems that we have is, even though Trinidad and Tobago has signed and ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was spoken about earlier, that convention is a binding obligation in international law. It doesn't have any effect in our domestic legal system. So even though you see the CRPD talking about inclusive education, there is a little bit of a deficit gap in terms of how we actually make that a reality in Trinidad and Tobago. From my perspective, which is a legal perspective, what needs to happen is that we need to enact legislation in order to give effect to the CRPD
Right.
And we also need to review some of the laws that we have on our statute books, the Education Act, the Mental Health Act, for example, that fosters a lot of discrimination against persons with disabilities.
But in your opinion, why do you think that we are not seeing legislation in terms of rights of persons with disabilities and policies being legislated in Parliament and so on? Why is that not a priority?
Well, I think that in general, we don't really see human rights as a country as being a priority issue, even though it's something that really touches and concerns us all. I don't know that I will be able to speak as to why the legislation is not being brought to the Parliament. I feel like maybe that should be a question addressed to the persons in authority. But we are seeing some movement. So we have things like the National Policy for Persons with Disabilities. I recently saw that the Ministry of Works and Transport put out a policy for disability parking.
Yes.
And the Minister of Health has been talking about mental health reform.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to do is create a situation that's going to galvanize all of those efforts into one holistic piece of legislation, which interestingly enough has been done in other Caribbean islands like Guyana, the Bahamas, Jamaica. They have specific laws protecting persons with disabilities.
Okay, and in terms of regionally, right, as we link, like it had the Caribbean Law Association, is there any way that they could come together and probably, you know, in terms of advocating or through consultation, that it could escalate in terms of the importance, and because many persons with disability, children especially, are falling through the cracks, you know, and leading to poverty and depression. And you would see some of them having kids and their kids in poverty and so on. You know, how, and we don't have data to say, okay, we have data and this amount of persons with disability could move, but this amount need, you know, social intervention.
So at the CARICOM level, we actually have regional instruments that speak to the rights of persons with disabilities. We have the CARICOM Charter for Civil Society, and we recently have a special rapporteur who is Senator the Honorable Dr. Floyd Morris out of Jamaica, who is a special rapporteur for persons with disabilities. So we are making some movements in that regard. And those international documents that I spoke about, one of them is the Kingston Accord, and it speaks to creating model legislation throughout the Caribbean to empower persons with disabilities.
And just to close, what would you like to see in terms of your profession, in terms of a legislative and a legal standpoint? What would you like to see persons with disability standing, you know, as opposed to then and now to have legal justification?
So I think that the most important thing is that we have to pass some kind of law to implement the CRPD. We also have to review the laws that are in our statute books that foster discrimination against persons with disabilities. And as you correctly pointed out before, we need to engage in some kind of data collection at the regional and national level so we can understand the scope of the problem.
Great, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, you know, for coming. I think they're ringing the bell.
Somebody thought this would happen.
So I get to be the cookie elf this morning. So you receive a cookie, but then you choose a star.
So I think that because it's December the 3rd, I'm going to choose 3 stars.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is so wonderful. Okay, so you read the names for us and the ages.
So I have Kale, who's 9 years old,
Right.
Janelle, who's 11 years old,
Right.
and Aaliyah, who's 12 years
Okay, wonderful. So that's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So you get the
you.
gifts back here for us, and the Seafront Lions Club will come on Friday to collect all the gifts to take to the schools. So
Definitely.
thank you so much, Ria.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
And guys, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Unique Not Different, TTT Live Morning Show now. Be good, do good. Until next week. Bye, guys.
Unique Not Different on Now is powered by Sagicor. Wise financial thinking for life.